Hey guys, welcome back to the Guilty as Charged podcast. Very happy to be joined by a special guest today, Eric Eager, the VP of Pro Football Focus and the co-host of Pro Football Focus. Eric, thanks for joining us, man. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Steven. It really is starting to dawn on me that we're starting the football season, and I couldn't be happier. The off season is always so long, and there's at this point in time, like there's only so many like Keenan Allen highlights against Derwin James I can watch. I want to see him sort of on a regular game field.
Yes, absolutely. And even just the scrimmage on Sunday that the Chargers had was a lot of fun. So we're going to dive into all of that. I think the rightful place for us to start is surrounding Justin Herbert. Obviously, that's, how he goes. The team is going to go this season and beyond. Pro Football Focus, you guys have kind of caught some slack for saying that he might have some areas of negative regression, might experience a little bit of a sophomore slump. So what areas are you guys predicting a kind of negative regression? And then we'll kind of dive into the other side of what areas he can improve too. But why do you think there's going to be some kind of negative regression here for Justin Herbert this year?
Well, first off, I think some of it is a little bit – there were a lot of people, including myself, that weren't high on him coming out of Oregon. And I think like there's absolutely no way to spin it other than he was fantastic last year. And I think if you're a Chargers fan, you come out of Rivers, who had a fabulous career, Hall of Fame career, you go right into Herbert. That's a fairly good transition. Yes. And they played into his strengths last year. He threw the ball downfield a lot. He was great doing it. He's got good receivers. And at the same time, he was pressured on more dropbacks than anybody in the NFL except for Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
The crazy thing about that, though, is when pressured, he was the best quarterback in football last year. And so you sort of think about, okay, when you look at – I try to make a baseball analogy, but it's like in football, clean pocket passing is kind of like your three outcomes in baseball: strikeouts, walks, and home runs. They're pretty stable, and they sort of like carry with you year to year.
Yeah.
The pressured pocket stuff is very much like batting average on balls in play. Once you throw the ball, let's say you get hit in the chin with a blitz. Once you throw the ball, you're not really in control of whether that pass rusher came on a 4-man rush, and so they have 7 back there to cover. It came on a blitz, so you throw the ball and a guy's wide open. There have been a lot of players who have had pop-up seasons, and then they weren't able to continue them. And you look back and you say, why was that the case? And it's like, well, he was tremendous under pressure. And that's where you look at now. If I'm the Chargers, though, like every single quarterback is better when clean than when pressured. So if I'm a Chargers fan, I want to see more clean pocket passes, which you're probably going to get given Raheem Slater, given Brian Bulaga, Corey Lindsey. Like you've done a good job sort of moving pieces into that offensive line. So you're going to see more clean pocket passes. So he's probably going to he should improve on those. I think the point is, though, is he has to kind of stay the same, even statistically.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I think, some people see the headlines and kind of freak out, but it stands to reason that, he's not going to be the best quarterback under pressure again. Mm-hmm. But obviously the hope is that he is going to be under pressure, less frequently. So what kind of areas do you think he can improve in? A lot of people kind of are buying him as a dark horse MVP candidate. Mm-hmm. As far as the Justin Herbert hype goes and areas he can improve upon, where do you land?
I think the one for me, and I say this about Trey Lance too, another like really strong arm quarterback who has a lot of tools, and he has to hit, in my opinion, what are called doubles. He has to hit more doubles. He almost had more yards, over 20 yards last season than he did between 10 and 19. And when you look at the quarterbacks who are consistently efficient in the NFL, or even schemes that are consistently efficient in the NFL, if you look at San Francisco, look at Tennessee, it's peppering the 10 to 19 area. And that's probably what they got Jared Cook for, right? A player who is, I think, more athletic than Hunter Henry, probably a little bit less sure with his hands and things like that, but a guy that can get down the middle of the field. He needs to do a little bit more of that. It wasn't that he was terrible there last year; it's just they didn't do it a lot. And I think part of that was just that and they're going to have to. I mean, when you look at the change from Shane Steichen, who I think many people believe the Chargers weren't well coached last year, and I think that broadly was true. If you look at end of game stuff, fourth down decisions, absolutely true. If you look at play for play on offense, I thought Shane Steichen did a great job last year. So you move on to like Joe Lombardi. The last time he had a chance, he was fired mid-season for Detroit in 2015. So like, to me, I don't even know if it's necessarily that Herbert has to improve. Like fundamentally, he had a lot of stuff. He was great last year. It's mostly that when you look at the data of, young quarterbacks in year two that change coordinators, it's a group of players that like don't do that well. And it's tough because, this is Herbert. I believe it's Herbert's fourth coordinator in something like 5 or 6 years. Like it's a constant struggle there. And we've seen a lot of really talented young quarterbacks struggle to get their feet because they're shuffling in and out with those guys every year. I mean, Baker Mayfield wasn't as good as Herbert was as a rookie, but he was pretty good. He led he had the touchdown record that Herbert broke.
Yeah.
But then he's on at coordinator number 3, and we're all wondering if he's worthy of a contract. And so that's what I'm worried about for Herbert is like his biggest challenge this year is going to be how does he adjust to a new coordinator for year 2.
Yeah, I think, in another world, Shane Steichen probably, becomes a solid coordinator. If he had maybe had a chance to work with Phil Rivers a little bit longer as opposed to, jumping right into a rookie. It was just kind of inconsistent. So hopefully Joe Lombardi can kind of stabilize that. You mentioned the offensive line. I've said this kind of before, but the upgrade from Dan Feeney to Corey Linsley, could not be bigger. What did you make of what the Chargers did this offseason with the offensive line? And really, how good do you think that unit can be in their first year together? Because it really is, a massive overhaul that they went through this year.
Yeah, I mean, Corey Linsley was the most valuable. He added the most wins above replacement of any center in football last year. I think that's one of the reasons Aaron Rodgers was not happy with the Packers. They let him go relatively freely. Matt Feller is also another player who I think has been pretty solid in the NFL. Left guard, Ode Abuche is, it's whatever, but left guard statistically is the least important position on the line. They're going to need kind of a Tristan Wirfs type season out of Rashawn Slater, though. And that they got a great steal. Like they somehow got him with pick 13 when, by the way, a pick that they were lucky to have because some teams won in week 17 and let them stay at 13 when they won.
Yeah.
It's really tough for tackles when they're young, right? So, we saw Andrew Thomas last year struggle. Actually, Becton and Wirfs were pretty good. Jonah Williams hasn't been great so far. So that's kind of a coin flip. I think long-term it's amazing for them, of course, to have those players in that position. It might be a little tough at the beginning, especially, you're in a division where you look at, Denver, it's Chubb, it's Von Miller. You look at Kansas City. Now, Frank Clark isn't very good, but Chris Jones certainly is, and he's playing on the outside this year. And then the Raiders are coming at you with actually some pretty talented players up front now with Yannick Ngakoue, as well as Max Crosby, and then Cleveland Farrell's a top 5 pick, or he shouldn't have been, but he was anyway. I think there's a little bit of a possibility for a leak there, but coming from where they came from, I don't think there's anything they could do but improve.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be tough to be worse than the worst offensive line in the league, which they were last year. Yep. Which would be exciting to watch. And Rashawn Slater, he's going through some lumps. It seems like in training camp, but he's getting some big wins as well. Went 4 for 4 in his first day of one-on-ones, which is huge, including a win against Joey Bosa. So very excited about him. In terms of kind of like the ceiling and a floor for a rookie offensive tackle, like, what do you think that the Chargers are looking at with Slater? Because obviously he's got a great talent. You mentioned kind of rookie struggles. Is the floor kind of like an Austin Jackson kind of season? Like, what kind of variants are we looking at for Rashawn Slater this year, do you think?
It could be Andrew Thomas, where you're almost replacement level at the beginning. And that's kind of the risk you take, right? For a long-term benefit, you take the risk of him being bad in year one. I think the benefit is that Brandon Staley's not going anywhere, right? So he doesn't need to be amazing year one. Whereas you look at Christian Darrisaw, the tackle that was picked after Rashawn Slater. He's in Minnesota. Minnesota probably needs to win, or Mike Zimmer gets fired. It's sort of a completely different thing there, and it's more risky. So I don't mind the pick, but I do think Chargers fans have to be okay with the possibility that he long-term could be good, but this season might not offer as much of a benefit as people believe. And obviously the ceiling is like, we've seen tackles come out, and I liked Slater coming out of Northwestern. Like you have guys that come out and who are who are all pros right away. And that's certainly something. Now, I think it's more like it's like in the situation for Wirfs, it was because Brady does such a good job of protecting his O-line. Herbert's not quite there yet, right? Yeah. But there is a chance that could happen. So that's what you do, right? Like, because left tackle, we saw what Trent Williams made. We saw what the division rival Kansas City Chiefs, what they're going to have to pay Orlando Brown after that trade. If you can get 4 years plus a fifth-year option on a left tackle for teens money in the draft, like that's still a huge benefit to you.
Right, absolutely. Let's shift to the defensive side, because I'm curious to get your thoughts about where kind of the league is trending. It seems like the Vic Fangio and Brandon Staley tree is really starting to branch out, and we're seeing a lot of safety play kind of take that leap forward, where in the past, safety was kind of a position that wasn't, very highly valued. And now you have Derwin James. Hopefully he's able to stay healthy. But what does Brandon Staley's defense allow Derwin James to do if he's healthy, of course?
Yeah, I think it all starts with Linval Joseph, right? Like when you look at the defensive lines that have done well deploying a scheme of multiple defensive backs, 4-man rushes, lighter boxes, it all requires a nose tackle who can hold the point of attack. And Joseph was one of the best players in the NFL at one point. He's not that anymore, but he could certainly hold the point of attack down. If they see any sort of regression in him, it's going to be harder, right? And when you look at the Fangio defenses in Chicago, it was Akeem Hicks, it was Eddie Goldman, but Akeem Hicks was really the guy, right? Like he held the point of attack down and rushed the passer so well that they didn't have to come with blitzes and things like that. And I think that's really what they want him to be able to do. Because when you can do that, then you can play multiple defensive backs. And that's what they're going to have to do, right? Because, losing, Chris Harris Jr. being a little bit older, obviously losing Casey Hayward. Now, he was getting older, but he had a fantastic career with the Chargers.
Yeah.
You're coming out here now with Asante Samuel Jr., who fell in the draft a little bit, Tavon Campbell, Michael Davis, who's been fine over the years, and Harris Jr. trying to play that nickel, Nasir Adderley. Like, those players can be good. But, like, let's say you have an injury or two to that group, and we know the Chargers have had injuries before, like, you need to be able to stack up reinforcements. And if those reinforcements are weaker coverage players, you probably have to play more coverage players, which, again, puts more pressure on the front four to create pressure by themselves and stop the run without the help of linebackers. Because if the more sort of like reinforcements you have to put in the box in linebackers or safeties, it makes it weaker. And that's really the foundation of that defense, is to play players deeper and have your safety sort of be that linebacker, but way deeper in the formation.
Yeah, that's a great call about Linval Joseph. He was really good for them last year. Unfortunately, didn't get any sacks, but his pressure numbers were really solid.
Yep.
And right next to him, I think a lot of the success of this Chargers defense is going to hinge upon how Jerry Tillery develops this year. Hopefully, he's able to kind of take that next step, but he's been kind of a disappointment, at least to this point for Chargers fans. What do you think this scheme can kind of do for Tillery in his third season?
Well, we saw it have a really good impact on Leonard Floyd when he went to LA last year. He got a contract extension. So, again, I think it stems on the dominance of what you can get out of Bosa. If Tillery plays inside on passing downs, what kind of matchups he can sort of scheme up there, what kind of pressure they can get from Nwosu and guys like that. It'll be interesting. I think one of the biggest mistakes, though, that the Rams made was not understanding how much of Leonard Floyd's success was due to that scheme and due to Aaron Donald and giving him the bag. It'll be interesting. Like if Tillery comes out and has like a 10-sack season, but the tape shows that it's kind of cleanup stuff and it's kind of pressures that were made more easy by playing next to Joey Bosa and guys like that, do the Chargers pay him? Because I think those are some of the big because you have a quarterback on a rookie deal right now, you can be a little bit more spendy, but that doesn't mean you should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Our analytics guy, Arjun, who works with you guys now, recently had a conversation with Brad, and they did a fantastic job kind of breaking down the state of the Chargers cap situation there. So let's talk about the AFC West as a whole here to wrap it up. Do you think that there's any chance that the hype this year for the Chargers is legitimate, that maybe they kind of close the gap with the Chiefs? I think everybody kind of is fighting for second in the division behind them. But how do you see the AFC West stacking up this year?
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is the Chargers have played the Chiefs really tough for almost the entire Mahomes era, right? So, at last season, they probably should have won the Week 2 game. In 19, they gave the Chiefs a run for their money in Week 17, and in Mexico, they were one Phillip Rivers interception away from tying the score and sending it into OT, and then they won in Arrowhead in 18 when those two were battling for the division. So this isn't a situation where the Chargers have been outclassed by the Chiefs in games. It's just the hard part is there's sort of this Chargerian way of operating where you can play. The Chargers can play with anybody, but they can also lose to anybody. Yeah. And they showed that at times a lot. Whereas Kansas City, and this, I was on a Chiefs radio station the other day, and they were asking about now that they're paying Mahomes, are they going to fall off? And I said, maybe. But the thing about the Chiefs, if you go back and look, they've hosted 3 straight AFC title games, gone to 2 straight Super Bowls, and during that time, they've not drafted well at all. The only player from Mahomes' draft that's left is Mahomes. The 18 draft doesn't have very many players left. They haven't hit on a second-round pick in 5 years. And so if they start getting luckier in the draft, for example, they might be able to extend even as the Chargers get better. Now, again, if Herbert steps up and becomes in that sort of Josh Allen class, let's say maybe the class is just a hair below Mahomes, then I think anything's possible, right? Because we've seen Mahomes get injured before. We've seen them not have a great defense. Their depth is an issue because they pay so many of their stars a lot of money. So I would still put them firmly as underdogs. I think the Chiefs are the most favored team to win their division in the NFL this year, but it's not insurmountable for the Chargers.
Yeah. I like I said earlier, it kind of just hinges on how big of a leap Justin Herbert takes this year. What do you make of the Broncos? Because I think their defense is so good, and the skill players too. They've got a lot of talent on there, but we don't know who the quarterback is. So what do you make of the Broncos this year?
Yeah, and I think as much as we like Fangio as a defensive guy, I don't think he's necessarily earned his medal as a head coach. And Pat Shurmur's had success in Minnesota before, but as an offensive coordinator, he's probably a little bit limited by the strength of the quarterback. If they would have gotten Aaron Rodgers, it would have been a free for all in this division. I think.
Yeah.
But I think we're also projecting a lot with the Broncos. We don't necessarily know that Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant, and company are going to be good. We've seen flashes of that. We don't know if Cortland Sutton's going to come back and the same guy as he was in 19. We like Javonte Williams. He's the best back probably coming out of the draft, in my opinion. But obviously he has to produce, right? And the offensive line is just okay. They got a pop-up year out of Garrett Bowles. And of course, on defense, they got to stay healthy, and they've not been healthy with Chubb and Von Miller at times losing time. And in the backfield, I think that's where they're the most anti-fragile. But again, cornerback play is extremely streaky. Ronald Darby was amazing in Washington a year after he was horrible in Philadelphia. So they're. I'm not going to put a ton of stock in the Broncos until they figure out the quarterback situation, or their defense becomes like the 0-2 Bucks. If either of those happen, I'll pay attention. Until then, if I'm a Chiefs fan, I'm the most worried probably about the Los Angeles Chargers, and then the Las Vegas Raiders. I think are not to be. They beat Kansas City in Kansas City last year. I don't think that they're anything to sleep on.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see. We're all very familiar with Gus Bradley. But it doesn't really seem like he's got the kind of talent that he's used to, particularly in the secondary. So that's going to be interesting there. Well, Eric, this has been great, man. Chargers fans, make sure and give him a follow at PFF_Eric on Twitter. Does some great stuff with data points. Obviously, we're becoming more familiar with the analytical world with Arjun on our show. So definitely worth a follow there. Eric, thanks for coming on the show, man. We really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on.